Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to be talking about something that doesn't get enough honest attention in Western hunting, and that's decision making when you're hunting solo and there's nobody else there to lean on. Solo hunting exposes everything. There's no partner to confirm what you're seeing, nobody to talk you out of a bad call, and no one to share the weight of uncertainty when things go quiet. Every move, every mile, every decision lands squarely on you. And for a lot of hunters, that's where things start to unravel, not because they don't know how to hunt, but because the mental load changes when you're alone. Most solo hunting mistakes don't happen because of bad tactics. They happen because of doubt, impatience, and emotional decision making. You start questioning good setups too early. You move because it feels wrong to stay, not because the terrain tells you to move. You chase activity instead of positioning yourself. And when nothing happens for hours or days, panic decisions creep in quietly and cost you opportunities you never even realized you had. In this episode, I want to give you a different way to think about solo hunting decisions, not motivational fluff, not just trust your gut. I'm talking about a practical decision making framework that helps you stay calm, disciplined, and deliberate when you're by yourself in big country with no feedback loop. We're going to break down when to stay versus move, how to manage doubt without outside confirmation, how to avoid panic decisions when the woods go dead quiet, and how to build real confidence that isn't dependent on results or reassurance. We'll also talk about why quiet days matter more for solo hunters than successful ones if you're paying attention. If you hunt solo, this episode isn't optional because when you're alone out there, the quality of your decisions matters more than your effort ever will. When you hunt solo, every decision carries more weight because there's no buffer between thought and consequence. In a group, uncertainty gets diluted. You talk things through, you bounce ideas off somebody else. Even bad decisions feel lighter when responsibility is shared. Alone, that safety net disappears, and suddenly every call feels final. That's not weakness, that's just human psychology under isolation. Solo hunting magnifies self doubt. Without outside confirmation, your brain starts searching for certainty where none exists. You second guess good setups. You replay past mistakes. You wonder if somebody else would see something you're missing. I have done that a ton. This is mental noise that drains energy faster than climbing elevation ever will. The longer you're alone, the louder it gets, especially when nothing is happening. The reason solo decisions feel heavier isn't because they're more complex. It's because emotional load increases when accountability is 100% yours. Fatigue, hunger, and time pressure stack up with no relief valve. You don't get the small confidence boosts of hearing somebody else say, "Yeah, that makes sense." That absence makes even simple choices feel risky. Another trap solo hunters fall into is overvaluing instincts without structure. People love to say, trust your gut, but guts are unreliable under stress. Instincts are shaped by emotion, not just experience. When you're tired, cold, or frustrated, your instincts change. That's when solo hunters start making decisions that feel urgent instead of decisions that are sound. What separates experienced solo hunters from everybody else is not just toughness. It's a lot of times the clarity that comes with it. They understand that uncertainty is part of the hunt and they stop fighting it. Instead of trying to eliminate doubt, they learn to manage it. They slow decisions down. They ask better internal questions. They rely on patterns that we've talked about a lot, and terrain and preparation rather than feelings in the moment. Solo decision making isn't about being fearless. It's about being disciplined when fear and doubt show up. The hunters who consistently succeed alone aren't the ones who never question themselves, certainly. They're the ones who don't let questioning turn to reaction. They recognize when emotion is driving the wheel and consciously put process back into the control. Once you understand why solo decisions feel heavier, you stop blaming yourself for feeling the weight and you start just building systems that make carrying that weight more manageable. The stay or move decision is one of the most dangerous or toughest decisions solo hunters make, not because it's complicated, but because it's emotional. When you're alone and nothing is happening, Movement feels productive. It feels like progress, but in reality, most unnecessary movement is just anxiety in motion. Solo hunters leave good areas too early more often than they stay too long. Without a partner to slow you down, boredom, doubt, and discomfort start masquerading as logic. You convince yourself you've given it enough time, even when nothing in the terrain, sign, or conditions has actually changed. That's how solid setups get abandoned right before animals use them. A critical skill in solo hunting is separating emotional triggers from objective signals. Emotional triggers sound like this: I haven't seen anything, this feels dead, I should be doing more, but none of those statements are data. Objective signals are things like wind consistency, travel routes, visibility, pressure sign, feeding and bedding proximity, time of day, and how terrain naturally funnels movement. If those boxes are all checked, staying is often the harder and smarter decision. Moving should be a deliberate response to new information, not just an attempt to force momentum. If the wind shifts in a way that compromises your position, that's a reason to move. If fresh pressure shows up that changes how animals will use the terrain, that's a reason to move. If daylight or thermals transition and your setup no longer makes sense, that's a reason to move. Notice what's missing from that list: feelings. The other mistake solo hunters make is moving too far too fast. Big relocations are seductive because they feel decisive, but they burn time and energy while compounding doubt. Short, calculated adjustments based on terrain usually outperform dramatic changes. 100 yards uphill or around a feature often teaches you more than hiking 3 miles just to try something new. The best solo hunters I know pre-decide their stay or move criteria before the hunt ever starts. They know how long a setup deserves. They know what conditions would justify leaving. That removes emotion from the equation when fatigue and silence creep in. You're not guessing in the moment, you're executing a plan you trusted enough to make when your head was clear. When you hunt alone, discipline beats urgency. Staying put in the right terrain, even when it's quiet, is often the decision that separates patience from panic and success from regret. Doubt is unavoidable when you hunt alone. Without a partner to validate what you're seeing or thinking, uncertainty has more room to grow. The mistake solo hunters make isn't experiencing doubt, everybody does. It's treating doubt as a signal to change something. In reality, doubt is just information about your mental state, not about the quality of your setup. There's an important distinction between productive doubt and destructive doubt. Productive doubt asks questions that lead to better decisions. Is the wind still right? Does this travel route still make sense? What changed since I last evaluated this spot? Destructive doubt doesn't seek answers, it just seeks relief. It sounds like I should be seeing something by now, or maybe I picked the wrong drainage entirely. One improves your position, the other pushes you to react emotionally. Experienced solo hunters manage doubt by slowing the decision loop instead of speeding it up. When doubt creeps in, they don't immediately act. They pause and reevaluate the facts they can observe: terrain, sign, pressure, wind, thermals, and time of day. This creates a buffer between thought and action, and that buffer is where discipline lives. Another critical skill is learning to audit your own thinking. Ask yourself why you want to change something. Is there new information, or are you just uncomfortable with uncertainty? Are you reacting to boredom, fatigue, or fear of missing out somewhere else? Honest self questioning is uncomfortable always in all areas of life, but it prevents you from letting emotion hijack your hunt. Data replaces reassurance when you're alone. That data comes from scouting, prior experience, mapping, and observation, not from feelings. The more you rely on repeatable patterns, the less you need to have external validation. You stop asking, would someone else stay here? And start asking, does this location still solve the animal's problems?
Step into the backcountry and step up your elk hunting game at Elk Camp 2026. This isn't a seminar, it's an immersive experience with real field training alongside successful elk hunters Matt and Saxton Hartsky. You'll learn how elk think and move, break down terrain like a pro, call with confidence, and practice 3 days of real world elk hunting scenarios that mirror what you'll face on your own hunt. This camp was built to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be in the mountains. With limited spots and hands on coaching, you'll walk away sharper, more prepared, and ready to hunt with purpose and confidence. Elk Camp 2026. Sharpen your edge. Register now and prepare for the season like never before at backboneunlimited.com.
Consistency is another antidote to doubt. Solo hunters who bounce between plans amplify their uncertainty. Hunters who commit to a process, even when it's quiet, build confidence through execution, not results. Confidence earned this way is slower, but it's more durable. Doubt never fully disappears in solo hunting, and it shouldn't. A little doubt keeps you sharp. The goal isn't to eliminate it, but to keep it from driving your decisions. When you learn to manage doubt without outside confirmation, you're going to stop hunting emotionally and start hunting deliberately, even when you're completely alone. Silence breaks more solo hunts than bad weather or bad luck. When hours or days pass without seeing animals, hearing movement, or finding fresh sign, the absence of feedback starts to really feel like failure. That's when panic decisions begin, not as sudden, obvious mistakes, but as small emotional adjustments that quietly compound. Panic decisions usually look productive on the surface. You start moving more, you glass faster instead of better. You change locations without fully understanding why. You call when you didn't plan to, or stop calling entirely, even though nothing about the setup changed. None of those moves are driven by new information. They're driven by the discomfort of inactivity when nothing's happening. The core problem is that quiet hunts create the illusion that something is wrong, where in reality, animals spend most of their lives doing very little that's visible to us. They feed, bed, and travel in windows that don't align with our need for constant confirmation. When you're hunting solo, that mismatch feels personal. You assume the silence means you're in the wrong place or making bad choices, even when the terrain and conditions are still solid. One of the most effective ways to prevent panic decisions is to reframe quiet as neutral, not negative. Quiet doesn't mean empty. It often means animals are behaving normally. If your setup accounts for wind, security, travel routes, and pressure, inactivity doesn't invalidate it. Abandoning good structure just to feel active often puts you further from success and not closer to it. Panic also thrives on fatigue. Long solo days drain mental reserves faster because there's no conversation, no shared morale, and no external pacing. As fatigue increases, impulse control drops. That's why panic decisions show up late in the day or late in the hunt. Recognizing this pattern lets you slow down when it matters most. Experienced solo hunters build deliberate pauses into their day. They stop, sit, glass longer than feels necessary, and force themselves to reassess before changing plans. These pauses act as mental rest points. They create space between emotion and action, which is exactly what panic tries to erase. The goal isn't to eliminate movement or adjustment. I'm not saying that at all. It's to make sure those changes are earned. When you resist the urge to manufacture activity just because things are quiet, you keep your hunt grounded in reality instead of just emotion. Quiet days don't demand panic. They demand patience, a lot of it. And patience is a decision you make, not a feeling you wait for. Confidence is harder to maintain when you're hunting alone because there's no immediate feedback telling you you're doing the right thing. No nod from a partner, no shared optimism, no one saying, "This feels good." In solo hunting, confidence has to come from somewhere else or it disappears pretty quickly. Most hunters tie confidence to outcomes, seeing animals, hearing bugles, finding fresh sign. Those moments create reassurance. The problem is that outcomes are inconsistent, especially in pressured country. If your confidence depends on confirmation, it's going to rise and fall with every quiet hour. Solo hunters who last and succeed learn to anchor confidence to their process instead of the results. Process based confidence comes from knowing why you're where you are. You understand how the terrain sets up. You know what problems it solves for animals. You trust your wind, your approach, your timing. Even when nothing shows itself, you can explain your decisions logically. That explanation becomes your confirmation. One of the biggest confidence killers in solo hunting is partial commitment. You stay in a spot, but mentally you're already somewhere else. You start glassing half heartedly. You check maps instead of watching terrain. That wavering erodes your confidence faster than being wrong. Fully committing to a decision, even if it doesn't pay off, builds more long term confidence than bouncing between options. Preparation also plays a larger role here than a lot of people realize. Confidence in the field is often just memory doing its job. When you've scouted, studied terrain, and built expectations around how animals use a place, you don't need somebody else to tell you it makes sense. You've already done that work. The field is where you execute, not where you renegotiate every decision. Another key is learning to accept uncertainty without interpreting it as failure. Solo hunting rarely feels comfortable. The absence of reassurance doesn't mean you're lost, it means you're relying on yourself. That discomfort is part of the process of becoming more self reliant in your decision making. True confidence in solo hunting isn't loud or emotional. It's quiet, steady, and patient. It allows you to sit longer, move less, and wait without spiraling. When your confidence doesn't depend on confirmation, you stop chasing reassurance and start trusting the structure you've built, even when nobody's there to see it work. Quiet days are where solo hunters either grow or unravel. When nothing happens, no sightings, no encounters, no obvious progress, it's easy to write the day off as a loss. But that mindset misses the point. Quiet days are not empty days. They're information rich if you know how to read them. The first mistake hunters make is judging a day solely by visible animal activity. Animals spend most of their time avoiding detection, though. A lot of encounters doesn't mean a lack of presence. Quiet days often tell you more about pressure, movement timing, and terrain usage than action packed ones, especially when you're alone and fully attentive. Solo hunting sharpens awareness because there's no conversation to distract you. You hear more. You notice subtle wind shifts, distant sound, and how thermals behave across different features. You start seeing how terrain dictates visibility and travel, even when animals aren't there to confirm it. These observations compound over seasons and become pattern recognition that can't be taught any other way. Quiet days also expose flaws in assumptions. If you expected animals to use a ridge and they didn't, the lesson isn't that the day failed. It's that something about timing, pressure, or conditions didn't line up for them to use that ridge. Those gaps refine future decisions. Hunters who rush through quiet days never collect that data. They just move on and repeat the same mistake somewhere else. Another benefit of quiet days is mental conditioning. Sitting with uncertainty builds patience and emotional control. It forces you to manage frustration without external distraction. This matters because the same discipline that gets you through slow days is what keeps you steady when opportunity finally shows up. Panic decisions are less likely when you've already learned how to stay composed in silence. Solo hunters who improve fastest don't try to escape quiet days, they analyze them. They replay the day in their head. What wind patterns stayed consistent? Where did pressure show up? What terrain features still make sense even without activity? Those types of questions turn solitude into feedback. Quiet days don't reward you immediately. They invest in your future hunts. If you treat them as failures, they're going to drain your confidence. If you treat them as lessons, they build judgment. Solo hunting isn't about constant action, it's about learning to extract value from the silence when it's there, because silence is where understanding lives. Successful solo hunters don't rely on instinct alone. They rely on structure. Instinct still matters, but it still works best when it's operating inside a framework that keeps emotion from running the hunt. When you're alone, decision fatigue is real, and without guardrails, even experienced hunters start reacting instead of thinking. A solo decision framework starts long before the hunt. It builds during scouting, map work, and honest self assessment. You decide ahead of time what makes a location location worth staying in and what conditions justify leaving. Wind direction, thermal behavior, terrain advantages, pressure indicators, and time of day all get defined in advance. That way, when things go quiet or uncomfortable, you're not inventing rules on the fly. One of the biggest benefits of a framework is that it limits the number of decisions you have to make. Instead of constantly asking, what should I do next? You're checking conditions against a known set of criteria. Fewer decisions means less emotional swing and less mental exhaustion over long days. Frameworks also create consistency for you. Solo hunters who improve season after season aren't necessarily seeing more animals, they're making better comparisons. When you hunt with a system, you can look back and identify what worked and what didn't. Without a framework, every hunt feels random and learning stays shallow. Another critical element is commitment. A framework only works if you trust it enough to follow it when doubt shows up. That doesn't mean being stubborn. It means understanding the difference between adapting to new information and abandoning structure because you're uncomfortable. Adjustments should be measured, not impulsive. The guardrails matter most late in a hunt. As fatigue builds and time runs out, pressure to force something increases. A framework prevents those last ditch chaos moments. It reminds you that quality decisions matter more than frantic effort. Many animals are killed late in hunts because hunters stayed disciplined when others unraveled. Don't get me wrong, the goal here isn't to eliminate uncertainty, it's to operate effectively and efficiently inside of it. When you build a decision framework you trust, hunting alone stops being a mental burden and becomes an advantage because your decisions are grounded, deliberate, and entirely your own. Solo hunting strips everything down to the essentials. There's no one to blame, no one to lean on, and no one to pull you out of a bad mental spiral. What you're left with is your preparation, your judgment, and your ability to stay disciplined when things don't go your way. That's why decision making matters more than effort when you're alone. You can work harder than everyone else and still hunt poorly if your choices are driven by emotion instead of structure. The best solo hunters I know aren't reckless or just fearless. They're calm. They understand that uncertainty is part of the game and they don't rush to escape it. They stay longer than feels comfortable. They move when it's justified, not when it feels urgent. They trust the terrain and their process and the framework they've built, even when nothing is happening. If this episode does one thing, it should make you more patient with your decisions and more honest about why you're making them. Quiet days, doubt, and discomfort aren't signs you're failing. They're part of becoming self-reliant in big country. Solo hunting doesn't reward panic, it only rewards clarity. And if you're serious about taking this to the next level and sharpening your judgment, that's exactly why I built Team Backbone. It's more than a membership. It's an inner circle for hunters who want to think clearer, train smarter, and make better decisions when it matters most. Inside Team Backbone, you're going to get 20% off site-wide on all Backbone Unlimited gear, a t-shirt shipped to your door every month, and full access to the digital content vault packed with guides, lists, a backcountry strategy, fitness programming, and mindset training. You'll also get access to private Facebook group with direct access to me and a community of driven hunters, plus direct call, text, or email access to me for personalized advice on training, strategy, or just sharpening your edge. On top of that, you're automatically entered into monthly gear giveaways. This is built for the guys who train for the hunt, push themselves in the off season, and want to be part of a tribe that makes them better. If that's you, Team Backbone is waiting for you at backboneunlimited.com underneath the membership tab. Thanks for being here. Appreciate all of you. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.